issues this morning. So I just want to add a disclaimer that it is probably going to be a struggle, but we'll try to get through it with you all. So typically what we do for these meetings is we do a welcome and introduction. So I'll start with a welcome of DHCD and agency staff that are joining us today. And as I mentioned, my name is Dan Farrell, Associate Director of the Energy Efficiency Office. Aaron Shoemaker, who is the Program Administrator for the HIEE program, is on the line. I believe that Eric Johnston, our Director, is on the line. Kristen Dahlman, our Policy and Legislative Director, is on the line. We have Pam Kester, who's our Deputy Director, as well as our Acting Director of the Housing Division. Willie Fobbs, who is Associate Director for our Affordable and Special Needs Housing Program or Weatherization Program, should be joining us at some point. Stephanie Flanders from Virginia Housing, and I believe Tony Ostrowski from Virginia Housing are on the line. And then we have Carrie Hearn from Department of Mines, Minerals, and Energy, or DMME. And we have, I believe, Mike Dowd from Department of Environmental Quality on the line with us this morning. Is there anybody, any of our agency partner staff that are on the phone that I missed?
Hi, this is Carrie Hearn with DMME. I just arrived.
Hi, Carrie. Thanks. All right. So we're gonna, Aaron, are you able to access the advisory group roster?
I have the roster up. I can go person by person.
Yep, let's do that.
And yeah, I can't remember if Dan said this already, but just as a reminder to everyone, this meeting is being recorded. So just like the previous stakeholder advisory group meetings, we're recording it, and we'll most likely be uploading it to the website after this. With that being said, I'm going to go ahead and get started with this roll call. And just, if you are here, make your presence known, please. All right, Liz Beardsley, are you back on?
Here. Good morning, everyone.
All right, thank you, Liz. Also, if I mispronounce your name, please forgive me. Nate Benferrado.
Yes. Hi. Good morning, everyone.
All right. Good morning. Carmen Bingham.
Good morning.
Good morning. Casey Bliley.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Got the audio figured out.
Nice. That's important. I spent a half hour doing that. We have Jonica Casper.
Yes, good morning.
Good morning. We have Eric Clavel. All right, we're going to put that down as a no. We have Michelle Foster. Also put that down as no. We have Chelsea Harnish.
I'm here. Good morning.
Good morning. We have Sunshine Mathen. Sunshine on the call. All right, do we have DeJuan Robinson?
Yep, good morning, I'm here.
Morning, DeJuan. Do we have Brian Staub?
Good morning, I'm here.
Morning, Brian. We have Adam Stockmaster.
Good morning.
Good morning. And do we have Narissa Turner?
Good morning.
Good morning. Do we have Karen Wilds?
Yes, good morning.
Good morning, Karen. All right, that is everyone on the list, and I believe Dan went over the DHCD contacts and other agency partners, but do we want to Did I miss anybody? Does anybody else want to do a quick shout out to let us know that I did not call your name?
Aaron, did you see that Sunshine, it was having difficult times with audio?
Oh, no, but thank you for letting me know. No, I have the roster full screen, but thank you.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you.
Great, I'm here. Thanks.
Well, with that, I will go ahead and close out the roster here and turn it back over to Dan.
All right, thanks, Aaron. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. And again, apologies to everyone that we're sounding like the old Verizon commercial this morning. But it's been pretty choppy. And so hopefully we can, our audio and our video connection will stay intact for the duration of this meeting. So I believe everybody got an agenda. This is just an outline real quick. I won't read it all here, but this is sort of the structure of the meeting for today. So with that being said, we're going to jump right in. We're going to do a little bit more detailed presentation in terms of updates and timeline. Then we're going to do a round robin style advisory group input and feedback on the Housing Innovation Partnership Grant Program proposal, the proposed allocations for fiscal year 22. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the advisory group schedule going forward. If time permits, we'll have, I think we're going to try to squeeze in some public comments, and then we're going to have the Virginia Center for Housing Research team give us an overview presentation of the GIS component of the technical assistance contract that we have in place now with the Center for Housing Research to support us on HIEE. So I'm going to try to move the slide along here. So again, without reading this in detail, where we stand today is that this is our 7th advisory group meeting. We are going to review a little bit the application, the response that we got for the affordable and special needs housing spring application round that was had projects due to submit on April 30th, and we had for the first time HIEE funding available for those projects. And then we are working very diligently on getting agreements finalized with the weatherization agencies for the use of the HIEE funds to support repairing deferrals that are causing homes to be deferred from the weatherization program. So that's going to be sort of ready by, we hope, summer. And then October will be the fall ASNH application round with HIEE funding available again at that point in time. So just a quick recap. This was our first time out of the gate with the HIEE funds and pairing them with the Affordable and Special Needs Housing Program. I think we were very pleased with the outcome. We did it on a fast track, and I do want to also mention our working group, our ASNH / Energy Data Working Group that made some really good comments and sort of worked over several iterations of this, but we did receive 41 proposals all together. Of those, 14 were requesting the Housing Innovations and Energy Efficiency Funds. And I want to stress that this is, the application review is still ongoing, so we're not, have not made any awards yet. But the projects that did come in for HIEE funding were a mix of new construction, rehab, and adaptive reuse. And at least for the funding requested, it was $7.2 million across 14 projects out of the approximately 8.7 million that we had available. So the next step will be to sort of get with the ASNH team and ensure that the projects are fundable, and that we're going to be, and then we'll follow up with some projects to either award funding or ask for some additional documentation. Commitment letters will be coming, will be forthcoming. And then again, we'll be gearing up for the fall application round based on the availability of funding at that point in time. So that will be October of 2021. So just as a reminder, last time it was requested, the last advisory group meeting, folks asked for a reminder of what were the HIEE requirements for AS&H. We wanted to share those again with you. These were publicized as an appendix as a part of the Affordable and Special Needs application for the April 30th round. And you can see what we have done for the HIEE requirements is to essentially require an additional level of energy efficiency performance above and beyond what Virginia Housing requires for the low-income housing tax credit program. And you can see here that for new construction, for example, that's meeting the Department of Energy Zero Energy Ready Homes standard versus Energy Star, which sort of sets a higher bar for energy efficiency as well as indoor air quality and some other some other desirable things that we would like to see more of in our affordable new construction projects. The HIEE funding was added. There were two options for project teams. They could either request up to $7,000 per unit or 5% of total construction costs up to $1.5 million, whichever was greater. So we saw project teams generally going for the 5% of TCC. In addition to the energy efficiency requirements, the ZERH or the improvement in the HERS score, there were some additional things that we required for the HIEE projects, which was the green building certification, good due diligence in terms of their HVAC system, calculation of the heating and cooling load, providing strategy for fresh air ventilation, dehumidification. If there were going to be existing ducts, they would need to be sealed and tested. And obviously with new construction, the ducts need to be sealed and tested as well. We asked for a cost certification from the architect or the general contractor in terms of the additional cost of meeting the HIEE requirements. And last but not least, the HERS rater plan review and preliminary rating, which is really sort of one of the key pieces that we're relying on in terms of the compliance for this, for the HIEE requirements. All right, so I'm going to keep moving and shift over to the work that we're doing with the weatherization team to operationalize the HIEE funding through we're actually going to be sort of working in parallel with the weatherization program, but these are the overall objectives that we've taken away from the conversations we've had with you and other stakeholders. Obviously, the opportunity to make repairs and get homes back into the weatherization queue, make them weatherization ready, is going to provide an opportunity to reduce energy bills, improve comfort, health, and safety for low-income households. We're enhancing access to services using a state funding source with flexibility to make these repairs that have caused or are causing the home to be deferred. We do want to stress, and I think we've had this conversation with weatherization agencies, that the addition of the HIEE funds does not make this a full rehab program. So the idea is that the HIEE funds are going to be sort of laser focused on addressing the deferral issues and getting these homes weatherization ready so that we can then weatherize them and unlock that energy bill reduction and savings that wouldn't be available otherwise. We had a very good webinar on May 11th with staff from all 17 of the weatherization agencies in Virginia. Very productive conversation, lots of questions. I think we were able to answer, a good number of those. And from that, we've been able to sort of get a better sense of how we're going to operationalize the agreements with the weatherization agencies. All right, so I'm going to move along here. So we will be doing separate funding agreements with the weatherization agencies, and the reason being is that the weatherization agreements specific to the WAP program are quite specific to the federal weatherization program. So we'll have a separate agreement and guidelines document for the HIEE repairs. We are going to work with the agencies to establish allocations of HIEE funds by service territory or service area. We'll be asking the agencies to estimate the number of deferrals and then an average repair cost for making those homes weatherization ready. And from that, we're going to get a set aside or allocation of funding that will be included in the agreement. We'll have an additional 10% above the allocation amount that will be for admin costs and overhead. So we'll add that 10% to the amount of money that we're allocating or setting aside for the HIEE repairs. We're also aware of and have had conversations with weatherization agencies, and we understand that it is going to take time to ramp up. There are needs for capacity in terms of staff, and also just lack of availability of a contractor base in some areas, and sort of a multitude of things that cause us to say that we're not going to be able to ramp this up overnight. It is going to take some time. And so we're cognizant of that. The agencies are cognizant of that. So we're not going to be inflexible. We're not going to say that this is not a use it or lose it situation where they have to spend all the funds in year one. But we are going to need to have reasonable progress in terms of getting homes repaired, getting the deferral issues taken care of, getting them weatherization ready, and getting them back into the weatherization queue. So we're going to work with the agencies so that we have a drawdown basis for these, so that they're this is going to help with their cash flow because they will not have to front the money, all of it at one time. So we're proposing that we'll do it as a drawdown, 10% on the agreement signing, 60% upon delivery of the materials and equipment, and then 30% on successful completion of the HIEE repairs, and then the determination that it's weatherization ready and ready to get back in the weatherization queue. So I think just we want to, we've already sort of talked about the fiscal year 21 allocations. Those have received support from the advisory group. We've done a decision package to the governor's office that's been approved. So those funds are in the process of, some of them have been appropriated and others will be appropriated. So we wanted to sort of focus in a little bit on the fiscal year or proposed fiscal year 22 HIEE allocation. And this is what we provided to the advisory group prior to, and wanted to just refresh this conversation and see, generally speaking, as we move forward, if this seems like a reasonable allocation of funds. Again, I want to emphasize that the 55 million is based on the revenue projections and the 4 quarterly auctions that would take place, Q2, Q3, and Q4 of this year, and then the Q1 22 auction. So we're sort of using this as a base case, and then as it is noted down below in the bold text, we want to use these any additional revenues to allocate to programs with the most demand, so that we have some flexibility to move the funds where they're most needed. So let's see. All right.
Dan, sorry, this is Chelsea. Could you go back, just a clarification on the bolded text? Are you saying additional Reggie money above 55 million?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. And you're when you say DHCD has the discretion, you just mean among these 3 categories, right? Not, or do you mean other programs as well?
Yeah, I think these are the programs, these are the buckets that are in conversation right now in terms of the advisory group. I think, as we've mentioned before, there are conversations with regard to other programs at DHCD, such as Acquire, Renovate, Sell, but we have not formalized that and kind of brought that forward as a proposal. So yes, I believe that these are still the 3 buckets that are in consideration. So does that?
Okay.
Yep.
Yep, thank you.
Okay. All right.
Dan, this is Sunshine. I actually have a quick question too on that for a moment.
Sure.
So the projected revenue shows the 4 revenue dates, since the auctions are quarterly. Is the anticipation that at least on the AS&H side, that it would still follow the 2 times a year in terms of allocation process? To anticipate some different schedule? I don't know, we've talked about that before.
Yeah, I think Sunshine. So the 2 auctions that would occur prior to the October fall AS&H round would be the Q2 and Q3 auctions. So, rough guideline, we don't know exactly what's going to take place here, but I mean, roughly speaking, it should be about half of the 33 million.
So Dan, this is Pam. There's an echo. I'm not sure. Sunshine, were you asking about the 2 rounds of affordable and special needs housing? So the fall and the spring?
Yeah, I was just wanting to confirm that the 2 rounds as historically been done are still going to be the same cycle. So that'll essentially be 2 tranches of projected revenue from auctions going into each round. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah, we anticipate continuing with those 2 rounds following.
Thank you.
All right. So I'm going to go ahead and move to the next slide. So the HEDC working group, or the Historically Economically Disadvantaged Community Working Group, we've had a number of conversations around tracking, sort of gathering, using demographic data to measure the impact of the HIEE program. And I think, one of the things that that DHCD wants to say is that in general, we are going to have to do, we're going to have to do more work to sort of address client level tracking of data across the programs. And that includes AS&H as well as weatherization. For example, and I think we've talked about this, but wanted to just sort of brief the full group. The AS&H application market studies are, do a good job of identifying demographic composition of the neighborhood or the immediate community where the project's going to be located. However, the owners are not necessarily tracking the occupants by demographics upon lease up. Unless there is a stipulation, for example, by HUD in terms of federal funding. So the focus again is on serving the low-income clients. We do have other programs such as the housing and special need, homeless and special needs housing program and rent relief program that are tracking demographic data provided voluntarily by the participants. So we can add race and ethnicity questions for voluntary compliance, but we can't compel those responses and obviously can't set aside units. But we can and will focus on outreach and income targeting in such a way that we'll be able to better measure the impact of the HIEE program and kind of reaching the HEDC communities. So these are some things that we wanted to just put out there for discussion, and I think also just as a level set for the group in terms of where we're at and where we need to go. So, so I think that's the last slide that we have prior to getting to the advisory group input and discussion. I don't have the agenda in front of me, but I think that noon is about when we had agreed to open this up. And I think the 3 items that that you see here that we need input and discussion around are the Housing Innovation Partnership Grant proposal that you all received last Monday. And then if there's any other discussion or input on the allocation plan for fiscal year 22, we'd like to hear that. And then the third item is an advisory group meeting schedule going forward. And I think when we started on this process, when we embarked on the process back in December, we had suggested that, as DHCD had suggested, that we may want to consider going to a quarterly meeting for the full advisory group. And I think that we've agreed that that's probably the best thing going forward, and that we keep the working groups monthly as needed, because again, some of the sort of more detailed work is happening at the working group level. But we think quarterly is sort of sufficient in terms of getting the full advisory group reconvened and having input on sort of other major decisions as we go forward. So the proposal would be to convene the full advisory group in Q3, presumably in September, maybe after Labor Day, and then we would keep the working groups going in the longer format as needed on a monthly basis. So a couple of other things is that we've had a lot of conversations. That is to say, DHCD has a lot of conversations going on with the weatherization network around operationalizing the HIEE funding for the weatherization repairs. So some of that is it could be construed as program development activity, but it's really sort of operationalizing the details so that we can get the agreements in place and start getting the pipeline going. So that's the last thing that I'll say in terms of setting up the discussion. We did want to also mention before we do this that we'd like to kind of do this in a round robin fashion and really get input from every member of the advisory group that's on the call today. So again, if you don't have anything that you want to say, that's fine, but we do want to make sure that we do our due diligence and see if we can make an effort to hear from everybody, all the advisory group members who are on the call. So with that, Eric, Pam, anything else that you want to add before we move to the discussion portion?
No, I think I'm good.
Okay.
Eric?
A great overview, Dan, and just thanks to everyone for all the work to get to this point. So we're look forward to hearing your thoughts on the 3 items that Dan just mentioned, and we'll go around for the whole advisory group.
So why don't we do it in alphabetical order? I know it's a little, perhaps a little awkward, but again, we do want to encourage everybody to provide some input. So let's start with the grant proposal. And Liz, did you have any thoughts or anything you'd like to kick us off with?
I'm still getting up to speed. I apologize. I will try to provide some comments probably after the meeting.
Okay.
Thank you, Dan.
Fair enough. All right. And I don't have the roster in front of me, but I believe Nate, did you have a chance?
Yes. Yeah. Hi, Dan. Yeah, in terms of the grants, I think it seems a reasonable starting point. I think the allocations you guys have suggested make sense to start. I think it's a great starting point, and it sounds like there's going to be plenty of opportunities to adjust and fine tune as applications and things like that move forward.
And Aaron, do you have the roster so you can help me out in terms of?
I was going to say how well your memory was going to do, but keep Carmen is next.
Oh, don't stretch the memories. We start to get up in age and the memories start to go a little bit. So yeah, please don't push too many of us older people on the memory side. I'd actually, if you don't mind, I'd like to wait. I was going to suggest you go backwards in the alphabet because I always feel like us, ABC people end up taking a lot of time that we don't get to the full thoughts of people. I feel bad for the people whose last names start with W when we go in alphabetical order. They were always the ones pushed to the back of my class, and I always felt, nope, it just doesn't seem fair. So I'm going to hold my comments for now.
Okay, with that, we next have Casey Bliley.
Hey guys, thanks for your work on this. I did review this last week, and I'm trying to kind of collect my thoughts as well. I have not had time to circulate it with our team, but I did kind of draft that initial communication out. I guess in my initial response, which was really focused on the 2021 allocation, not the 2022 planned, I do appreciate the emphasis on retrofit and existing buildings. I thought your targets and the kind of methodology in which that you were trying and what you guys were trying to do and the purpose was well outlined. I am noting too, I think that it was really good that you guys did provide some sort of incentive for benchmarking with the ASHRAE level 2 pre and post. I think that benchmarking as a satisfying pre is a good standard, and hopefully will encourage more developments to benchmark their portfolios. The last kind of thing that I just wanted to ask, which I think is well clarified, is the ability for our public housing authorities to participate and leverage these funds. I just want to make sure, with that housing stock, that we are providing opportunities to kind of think through how to get resources where they need to be. I might have more comments at a later date, but that's just my initial feedback. Thank you.
Thanks, Casey.
All right, next up we have Jonica.
My initial read, I struggled a little bit with understanding the difference, the innovation plan, how it differed from the other bucket of funds with the affordable housing program. But time will tell on that. I think I'm currently a skeptic of what is called innovation. But I think it was laid out well, and we'll see what kind of proposals actually come in. Because if it's got to be tested, which is the way I read it already, it just seemed to me that it was more of the same. But other than that, I thought it was well laid out, and you'll get a better read once you put it out in the marketplace to see who is applying for this versus the other tranche of funds.
All right, thank you, Jonica. And did Eric jump on by any chance? Not Johnston. Other Eric. I don't think so. What up, Michelle Foster? Michelle, jump on. All right, good to know. Then Chelsea.
Yes, thank you. First, thank you for putting together this proposal. I think it's clear that it was well thought out. I do agree with Jonica about that it does seem similar to the ASNH program, but I think that as you add more meat to the bones, then I think it'll be very clear how they are different. I've said in other conversations, I think also I share Jonica's skepticism of innovation. I do think there's a fine line between innovation that helps projects on the ground, but then innovation that sort of has this wow or cool factor that doesn't really move the needle. So I do appreciate that you clearly and specifically call out innovation that is scalable. I think that is really the key piece here, is that we are looking at innovation that is scalable and not just a one-off factor. So I was happy to see that. I think also we want to make sure that, I apologize, it's allergy season for me. I also want to make sure that we're not reinventing the wheel, that just because something might not be happening here in Virginia, it might be happening somewhere else. And so just ensuring that we're not calling something innovative that, you know, maybe our friends in Maryland have been doing for quite some time. So just being aware of that. I also appreciate that it had components for education and awareness. I know in the energy efficiency space, I've been hearing a lot lately from some of our members about how, you know, you can build a building to LEED or to Earthcraft or to some high standard, but if the tenants, whether, you know, they're commercial or residential tenants, don't understand how to keep that going, how to continue the building performance, then you're sort of, then you lose that opportunity. So I really appreciate that consumer tenant education and awareness is included there, because I think those are incredibly important and sometimes lost in the equation. And then finally, I just want to bring up workforce development. I have been having many conversations lately about the need for workforce. It's already been brought up today that there is the pipeline for new jobs is lacking. And so I think this is incredibly, this is an area of huge opportunity, that suddenly there is this influx of money going to affordable housing, both weatherization and new building. And we need to ensure that at the end of the day, we're not hearing, oh, we couldn't spend this money because there aren't enough people to perform these duties. So I think workforce development is critical moving forward. And that's all I have.
All right, thank you, Chelsea. Next, alphabetically, is Sunshine.
Good afternoon, everyone. I actually already sent some more detailed comments to Dan earlier this morning. I had shared the draft with some other local organizations doing, you know, related work, or folks who might be likely applicants for this funding in one way or another, just to kind of get their feedback. So I integrated those. So I won't go into detail, but I'll just kind of cover high level comments here. One, I agree with Jonica and Chelsea that I'm a little uncertain about how what will emerge out of this that's different from the current buckets, but I'm okay also with having a little patience with that and seeing what time will tell. I will say overall that the comments I took away from my colleagues and so forth is that if a project applied to multifamily, it would be easier to navigate than if it were single family in this given form. It's easier to administer from that perspective on the multifamily side. One detailed point is that earlier in the conversation this morning, Dan, you highlighted that the proposed funding structure under WAF would be on a drawdown basis, and I would recommend mirroring that in this application, as opposed to expecting partners to front all the costs and only get reimbursed at the very end. And then the last comment is more kind of big picture, but you know, in the final piece, there's around the planning grants. You know, I would recommend kind of less planning, more action, more capacity building, more workforce development, and prioritizing that end of the spectrum.
Okay, thank you, Sunshine. Next, we have Juan.
Sorry, was that me?
Yes, you are up next on the round robin.
Yeah, I am also having some audio difficulties now. Thanks. I'm going to repeat A few things that that both Chelsea and I think Sunshine just mentioned. I agree with Chelsea on the grant. That scalable piece is really important, because one of the things I think we've struggled from the get-go here is to what extent are we using these funds for HIEE as just, oh, we have some incoming funds and that's great, and we can do some patchwork type of upgrades and make a difference in the immediate term, just kind of money in, money out, input, output. But to what extent are we thinking about how we can leverage these funds to think about some of those longer term solutions? So I really like that scalability and that innovation and replicated aspect of the grant. I think it's really important. Agree that a couple of the others that mentioned the explicit call out for existing buildings, 100% agree. Also, prioritizing HEDCs, I think it's right on. The only comment that I would make, and maybe a suggested addition, is there's a call out on the building materials used that are sustainably sourced for positive GHG emissions. I think that's good. I would also add setting standards for healthy building materials for the grantees to use as well, on top of sustainability and environmental impact. I think would be a welcome addition. But otherwise, I think the proposal is fine. The percentages, I think that the percentages have been the percentages for 22 for a couple of months now. I think I'm in general agreement there. Obviously, hopefully some flexibility depending if there's more or less anticipated money from Reggie, but that speaks for itself. And then on the meetings, yeah, I'm fine with the quarterly meetings, but I do want to emphasize as well that I do think there's a lot of value for having the work groups continue to meet monthly as was originally floated. So I know we all don't like meetings, especially like throughout the summer, but I do think the monthly working group meetings would be a value add. So I would like to emphasize in keeping those. That's my only comments. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Dewan. And then next up, we have Brian.
Yes. I really like the idea of this grant. I think there are a lot of multifamily owners out there that could take advantage of it. My one comment, I think, would really be maybe some of the innovation needs to be in who you reach out to and how you're getting this information out. I see in affordable housing a lot of institutional owners out there now, especially with projects that LIHTC projects coming out of compliance, their initial compliance periods, but still under extended use agreements. And how do you reach those guys? I think if you were able to, you could really get a lot of housing units participating in programs like this. So I think outreach is maybe one of the most important areas to think about with this program.
All right, thank you, Brian. Next, we have Adam.
All right, thank you very much. I did have a chance over this weekend to review the proposal for the Housing Initiative Partnership Program. I found it very detailed and well thought out. Particularly, I'd like to draw attention to the tenant education part. Without question, tenant behavior, we could put in the best and most wonderful equipment in all of our apartment dwelling units, but if the residents don't know how to effectively use the systems and all the features that are within their apartment homes, sadly, they don't get the best bang for the buck. And in an effort to really make sure that happens, I would encourage that to be an absolute steadfast requirement along with benchmarking. The priority for retrofits is a encouraging thing to see, but I would be remorse to say that there's a lot of new innovations that are possible with new construction relative to retrofits. So I want to look at that allocation as future funding rounds occur. if I have a chance now to speak to the 22 allocation percentages, and kind of serves as a transition from the HIP program. If I saw the earlier slide correct, it looked like there was approximately $1 million or $1.2 million under subscription in this last round for the HIEE funding. So I know it's kind of hard to tell without a crystal ball who would be interested in the Housing Initiative Program, but I also would hate to see funding allocated that goes unused. So I would just ask that, if in fact it is not used in the first year because people are working on new innovative projects that take a long time to put together, that the funds roll over for subsequent funding cycles, as I think that'll allow the development community, including myself, longer time to work on these more challenging projects in detail. Lastly, without question, I think we need to keep working monthly in our individual work session groups, and I'm happy going to quarterly or even bi-monthly meetings for the entire session. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Adam. Next, we have Narissa.
Hi, can you hear me?
Can hear you.
Perfect. I don't have too much more to add that hasn't already been said. I will just lift up again the comment on it is a little difficult just from this proposal to see how it's significantly different than some of the other two allocation buckets. But again, to another point made earlier, that might just be, it'll just depend on what we see. And then actually just a clarifying question. So for the 2022 funding cycle, with the addition of the planning grants, could an applicant, would they have to, if they wanted to access both planning funds and funds for implementation, would that require 2 application cycles?
That's a great question, Narissa.
It's okay if we don't have an answer now. It's just like curious about that. I could see that being confusing to folks. Yeah,
I think it's a great question. Yeah, I think we should find a way. We should find a way to do that. Maybe to. Now, I think the way we have it structured is that we would, assuming that we have support and we can kind of move forward with the fall application round, that would be focused on the retrofit, proposals. And then in the spring, we would come back with the planning grant or hybrid planning implementation grant that would be sort of focused more on the long term in terms of what sort of community-based organizations would like to see, but yeah, no, it's a really good question.
And then related to that, it's just with that, if it is a separate application cycle or something like that, maybe there might be some consideration for the criteria. I imagine the criteria, you would likely want different criteria for a planning grant versus sort of the larger implementation grants.
Yes.
And then the last, again, question that maybe you don't have an answer to is just what was the factor between the amount that it's capped at? And I asked that not knowing a whole lot about the planning process for these types of projects, but I don't know if this seems like it would just seem like a reasonable number or where that number came from.
Narissa, which number were you talking about on this?
So the planning grant. I think you said it was max of $50,000. Sorry, I'm referencing
max of $500,000.
$500,000. Yes,
yep.
Sorry.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, where that comes from is the notion that it would not necessarily be it wouldn't be purchasing building materials per se or equipment. So it wouldn't be hard costs, but it would be planning, outreach, education, activity that was needed to sort of engage and better understand how we can implement or how we can invest HIEE money going forward.
Okay.
And maybe find new pathways to more innovative approaches.
Yeah. All right. And then again, related to that, I swear this is the final thing. It again might be worth considering if someone were to both want to apply for planning money and then later implementing money, if we wanted a like total cap. Like if you started and just started with the concept and doing planning and thinking about that, and then you also came back for money for implementing, is there a max amount of money we would want a singular project to have? So
that's another very good question. Yep.
That's it. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Narissa. And then last but not least, on the alphabetical round robin we got going on here is Karen.
Okay, I want to thank Carmen for acknowledging that the person at the end of the pile has not much lot to say, but thanks you all for all this hard work that's gone into this. And I certainly appreciate the opportunity for government/public housing authorities to apply for the dollars. And I think for us, I think it's really important that there's been this focus on retrofitting. So I appreciate that. And certainly I agree with the allocations at this point, and I think we'll have lots of touch points in the future. I absolutely agree with Adam regarding the tenant education. That's incredibly important. We found that with lots of things, and I know it's going to be very important for our population. So I agree with the full work group going to quarterly, and look forward to working with the working groups on a more frequent basis.
All right, thank you, Karen. And yeah, if we're doing the alphabetical round robin, that was the last on the main roster. So I'll turn it back over to you, Dan, given that it's 12:24, about what you want to do.
Yeah, well, Carmen, let's give you some time. If there's something that, that hasn't been touched on already that you want to add.
There's just two short things, but the rest I'll share in an email with everybody. One is Narissa's comment or question about the $500,000 cap on the planning grants. I think she was asking like where that number came from. And Narissa, I will just share that, it's kind of standard in terms of grant processes that 500,000 is like the max you would probably need for planning, particularly around some development when you're looking at innovative ideas. So some planning grants have gone higher than that. Some are even lower than that, depending on the work. But, that's just, I don't want to say it was pulled out of the air, but it's just kind of more standard practice. So, I'm sure that's what these folks here, kind of seen in the industry and figured that was a good number to kind of cap these things at. And my second comment is there are some, first of all, staff is you've done a great job in terms of trying to pull together and listen to what the advisory council have been saying, what outside people have been saying, and developing this straw proposal on the innovations grant. I think, yes, several folks have said, I had a little trouble, but I just assumed it was because I wasn't a developer and I didn't understand the difference between innovative and tested. So I think there needs to be some more meat in that to help clarify that for applicants. I also think that we're missing a significant piece in here, and this is part of the meat that's going to have to be in the application process itself, is understanding what it is we're targeting, like what our goals are. So there were certain things like, are we going to set forth, EE cost savings targets that have to be reached and measured? Are we going to set specific kilowatt hour measures? And I'm not saying actual like this number of kilowatt hours, but more like the percentage of where we're looking at. Are we looking at net zero energy savings as a goal for certain projects? How is that going to be measured? Also, how do we measure community involvement? Are we going to be looking at and requiring local contractor use, the demographics of those contractors. How do those local contractors get qualified as actual weatherization providers or energy efficiency providers or whatever it is that needs to be done? What local community groups are partnered? Is that going to be a metric that we're going to look at? Also, what are the demographics of the families that are impacted through these projects? I know we can't ask for it, but the voluntary, let's look at who you're serving, who you're impacting in those communities. Also, the education piece, the homeowner education piece or tenant education piece in terms of innovative technologies or new, energy efficiency technologies that are being implemented. How are we measuring what that education piece looks like? Is there going to be a requirement in terms of, completed certifications, whatever, on the education piece? And then finally, where are these projects located? I know we're working with, and that's probably the next piece, and maybe this is the lead into this next piece with the Virginia Tech folks, but are we going to have a requirement that these innovation projects actually are in the targeted neighbors that we determine we want to focus on through this funding, based on the demographic, based on the information that we're going to get from the folks that we're partnering with Virginia Tech on? Is that going to be a requirement of where these innovation grants have to be located? And then also, I think something that's not in here but might be a qualifier is, Chelsea brought up the workforce development. There are workforce development training programs already in place through our community colleges. One of our weatherization providers has a training program. Can we require through this grant program some type of collaboration with existing programs, whether they be state, local, community, whatever they are, but something that actually involves the existing programs, so that we really get a synergistic outcome from all of the work that we're trying to do in this area specifically. So again, I will put all of that in an email, send it out to the advisory council folks so they understand, you're not taking drastic notes here, but those are some of the thoughts that I've had as I was looking at this and how we really make this program effective. Thank you.
Thank you, Carmen. Great comments. Yes. So let me see, we're at 12:30, just in terms of a time check. I think some of the advisory group members sort of took the opportunity to discuss all three of the issues that are before us here. In general, it doesn't sound like there's any, nothing that necessarily rises to the level of needing to discuss the allocation percentages any further, other than the flexibility piece that we've talked about. It sounds like folks are generally, in terms of scheduling, in agreement with the quarterly schedule, that we try to reconvene the full group in September. We'll have the June auction results at that point in time, and we can sort of analyze those and share those with you. So anything else that at this point in time?
This is Sunshine. Just quickly on the last point on the schedule. It seems, given the frequency of meetings up until now, not meeting again as a full group until September seems like a fairly significant leap in time. And I wonder if, recognizing that the working groups are going to continue some of their meetings along the way, whether we can ensure that the full advisory group is getting updates on that on a regular basis. That would help feel like there's just not this big gap in time between those two, between now and then.
Yes, Sunshine, that's a good point. And one of the things that has been helpful for me in having Aaron on board is that we've been able to get some detailed notes from the last two advisory group meetings, and we'll continue to do that. So could we offer to share detailed notes as a package with the advisory group from any of the May work group meetings, and then any of the ones that would take place this summer. Would that be sufficient?
I guess my thought is that if depending on how detailed those are, I may or may not actually choose to read them or feel like I have the time to read them. So it would actually be great to get a sort of a digest of the kind of key points that were discussed, and then maybe include the detailed notes, but that gives us a way to kind of digest a little bit without having to read through everything.
Got it. Yep. So it'll be a summary and then the notes themselves for you all.
Dan, on that point, this is Carmen. You know, I was thinking that I'd hate to throw a meeting in there, but I think after the end of the fiscal year, we'll know what the allocations were for June, and so having just an update to the advisory council on the June allocation amount, so we know the official number on that, and then include also a summary of the updates from the working groups through the end of the fiscal year. You know, if we have a time frame to get that, like maybe by the end of July, because I know you guys got to wrap up some stuff the beginning of July for end of fiscal year. But maybe making a target of by August 1st, just having that update, and then we'll have that quarterly meeting in September, might help us all just know when it's coming, and we'll have information in front of us as to what the work groups have been doing in the meantime.
Yep, that sounds reasonable to me. And we can do that. Yep. All right, Eric, Pam, anything that you want to add at this point?
Nope, I think this has been great feedback. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, great. Very helpful feedback. Thank you, everybody.
All right. So I think we are at a juncture where I'm going to, I'm going to just really quick give you an overview of the scope of the agreement that DHCD has with the Virginia Center for Housing Research. And then I think we'll go ahead and shift to their presentation, and then we'll do public comments with time permitting. But I did want to say, and I want to thank the Center for Housing Research team. This is, I think this is a really good scope. I think it's exactly what we need. I give them 99% of the credit for this, but this is generally what they're going to be doing for us in terms of supporting HIEE. So their task one is an energy analysis piece, which is predictive energy modeling for HIEE program savings and greenhouse gas emission reductions. So that is going to be predictive modeling on some prototypical types of buildings that are typically built, in affordable housing. And so that will sort of give us a ballpark in terms of what, because folks will ask me, what is the, how much additional savings are we getting out of the additional requirements? And so that will be, this energy modeling will help us get to that information. They're also going to be helping us with a data acquisition methodology for the actual program energy savings when the final ratings and testing are done on these projects. And then that will be used to sort of iterate and drive the program design going forward. Then the GIS piece, which you're going to hear about in quite a bit of detail from Mel, that's going to be helping us identify communities with high energy burdens and to map these projects and use that as sort of a tool to visually engage with and understand the impact of the HIEE program. And essentially that tool will be developed as a package so that DHCD staff can sort of readily update the maps and add new data to it as we get more data. And then thirdly, there's going to be program evaluation tools, which is also another area where we needed support. So that will be working on the building level M&V or benchmarking guidance and technical assistance. They'll be providing assistance on the occupant feedback surveys. This is work that they've already done. So we're basically taking advantage of some work that the Center for Housing Research has done and has expertise in. They've been very helpful to us on the cost increases, the material costs, construction material costs and equipment increases that are now impacting the market. So we've got, real-time, up-to-date information on this, and then just overall reporting support and analysis for us as we go forward. So with that, I think I'm going to stop sharing, and we'll see if we can get Mel up and running with her presentation. And Mel, if you're on the line, could you do a sound check for us?
Sorry, y'all, the trash truck is right here right now. Just give 1 second.
Of course. And the popcorn is burning in the microwave, yes.
Okay, so I'm trying to present, but it's not letting me. Hold on, let me try one more time because you might have still been sharing. Yeah, the share button is grayed out for me. Daniel, do you know why?
That I do not know.
Okay, let me try something else. I got it. Never mind, I got it.
Okay.
Yay.
Okay, and that trash truck is going to come back the other side of the street, so you guys are going to have to bear with me when that happens. All right. Whoa, I'm starting at the end. Hold on 1 second. Okay, so can you guys see task 2, energy burden analysis and GIS mapping up there?
Yes, we can.
Oh, hold on 1 second again. Okay, so this task, or what I'm going to talk about right now, is entirely focused. Huh? Okay, I have to finish with this meeting. Thank you. Sorry, y'all. This presentation is going to be really hyper-focused on this energy burden analysis and how we're going to map considerations about energy cost burden and disproportionality. Those households that are disproportionately experiencing energy cost burden. So I don't want you guys to feel like, oh, I'm not talking about mapping projects and sort of outcomes. This presentation is concentrated on that subject, but we will be helping with those other mapping components. So you guys know many on our team. And when we're talking about task 2, I'm going to be leading the analytical portion and designing a database and thinking about the measurements that are relevant here. And that's what we're going to discuss today. Armin is going to be helping me a lot with that. And then we have Saren and Ivan from VCU, who are mapping experts, who will be helping us with those spatial visualizations and spatial analysis, and then also creating that web GIS user platform. Okay, so we just have some definitions here. I'm going to breeze over this a little bit and come back to it if you guys want me to. But I want to talk a little bit more just about our approach and let you know that we're going to use this sort of standard definitions of HUD income levels, for example, energy burden defined as the percentage of gross household income spent on energy costs, and we'll decide what percentage we want to use in some preliminary analysis. The public use microdata is going to be our primary data resource. And this is the same data that is used for the DOE lead tool, but we'll be using it more holistically to start capturing those considerations regarding race and household composition and lots of other details. Okay, so our objective is to conduct analysis that allows DHCD to plan for HIEE investments in places with high levels of energy cost burden, and that promotes equity by investing in housing for people who are disproportionately impacted by energy cost burdens, and who have or are experiencing the effects of racism and segregation, systematic or otherwise, that have resulted in housing-related disadvantages. We're going to start with some preliminary data analysis, and that will help us decide on the approach and methodology we'll use. Then we'll create a database, map that database, and configure it so that DHCD staff and the public, really, if we so choose, can use it. It's unnerving me a little bit that I can't see you guys. Are you still hearing me and everything?
We hear you.
We can hear
Okay,
you.
great. Yeah, okay. All right, so I'll first tell you a little bit about the public use microdata from ACS. So the geography for the public use microdata is defined based on population, and there can be no fewer than 100,000 people in a PUMA, which is the public use microdata area. That means in more densely populated places, we have more PUMAs. So in Fairfax County, for example, we have 3 PUMAs. Loudoun County, we have 3 PUMAs, while as where I'm located in the New River Valley, the entire region constitutes a single PUMA. So the geography will be a limiting factor to some degree, but I'm going to talk about how we can use the public use microdata in conjunction with the American Community Survey published tables, very similar to the way the LEAD tool does it, to get our targeting down to smaller geographies. So first I want to tell you about the power of the public use microdata sample. We're going to think about energy burden for households, starting with those who spend more than 30% of their income on electricity and heating fuel alone. In some places, we'll find enough of those households to make a reliable estimate of that number. In other places, energy burden will be less extreme, and we will have to go to smaller percentages. So think 15% of your income towards electricity and heating fuel, 10% of your income towards electricity and heating fuel. And once we've got those populations isolated in the data, we can think about characteristics of those households. So their income level by area median income, poverty status, and then other income thresholds. We can also think about race and ethnicity of those households, family composition. So think single parent with a child, multi-generational families, you know, 2 parents, 2 children, you name it. We can think about all those things in terms of family composition, household size, and then also other housing problems. So are these folks housing cost burdened primarily because of energy, let's say, or are they also experiencing overcrowding? Do they also experience incomplete plumbing or kitchen facilities? We can think about everything that describes a household that is experiencing energy cost burden. We can also look at the housing that they're in. So single family, attached, detached, mobile, manufactured, multifamily, small, medium, large. We have lots of detail in this data set. Year built, fuel source, for example. And year built and fuel source are things that you see in the LEAD tool, but the richness that we're going to capture with this data that the LEAD tool really leaves out is the race and ethnicity, the family composition, household size, those types of things. Reliability will restrict estimates for small populations in some regions. And I'll give you an example that we just finished a regional housing study for the New River Valley, and because the size of minority population here is pretty small, it's impossible to break out housing cost burden for individual race and ethnicity groups and get reliable estimates. So depending on the population in each part of the state, we may have to aggregate up to say all minority households, for example, to get reliable data. So after we take this detailed look using the public use microdata sample, and we figure out the housing characteristics and the household characteristics of those households experiencing cost burden, we can essentially develop criteria to look for census tracts of interest. So let's say we know at the end of the day that households headed by someone who identifies as Black are disproportionately cost burdened, energy burdened in a particular region. Then we can say, where do we find households with those attributes, such as Black, headed by someone who identifies as Black, also having a low income or extremely low income, all of the characteristics that wrap around those folks who are disproportionately cost burdened. We can find where those people are in the state, sometimes down to the census block level. And then we can start thinking about how we want to operationalize that information to direct or plan for the direction of HIEE investments. So we can think about either in or out on the tract criterion. We can develop our own custom index, which shows cost burden with additional characteristics. Or we can even create a composite index. And I think that this is a little bit outside of our scope to start integrating all these different indices and create a composite index, but we can at least think about these things by using additional map layers. So the empirical analysis that we're going to use to just support these decisions, primarily regression analysis and correlation analysis, will allow us to figure out what household and housing characteristics are most predictive of energy cost burden. And that will help guide our selection of the tract criterion, for example. But then, you know, it's also important to include perspectives both from the literature and from you all on what's really important. And so we'll have maybe a two-part decision making, one that will be guided by the data, and then the other that will be guided by the literature and by leadership. There's also some option to do some exploratory research here where we have more data availability and richness. So we know that we can get even more information from the American Housing Survey, where Virginia jurisdictions have been included, from the National Housing Preservation Database, from local parcel and assessment data. I'll give an example that assessment data is far more reliable in terms of year built than American Community Survey data, because American Community Survey data is purely self-response. So you can think about a renter living in a small multifamily building and being asked, what year was this building built? And that person doesn't likely know for sure. They're going to guess. That may be an educated guess or not. So it's nice to have other data sets that we know are more reliable to kind of layer over the American Community Survey. And so an example is assessment data. And then we are also thinking about DHCD administrative data pieces that could be useful. So we're thinking as an exploratory option to take a few places where either the Center for Housing Research or the Center for Urban and Regional Analysis already have a lot of this data compiled in order to demonstrate the possibilities that if we were to compile more data for each locality in Virginia, kind of the level of analysis that we could do far smaller geographies than the census block or the census tract. We're anticipating that the census block to be the lowest level of geography for general mapping, but in more suburban and rural areas, it is entirely possible that in order to get complete coverage, we would have to go as high as the tract level in order to get reliable data. Then the other piece that will definitely come in as a mapping tool, and we will have to take the time to look at all of these measures that you all have suggested and that the work groups have suggested to see how they interact together and make sure that, you know, if home heating energy poverty risk index has too much overlap with our energy burden index or measure, then it will put too much emphasis on a single geography. So we'll have to think about the interactions between other indices and the one that we're creating. However, we will find ways to map other subjects that you guys are interested in. So you can add them on as layers and see the interaction between, this is a place that we know has been historically impacted by redlining, and it's a place where we see folks disproportionately energy burdened. And you guys can think about how that crossover, maybe in terms of a heat map, can help you to target specific areas, specific groups of people. So that's the end of my presentation, and I hope that it gives you an idea of the data richness available, and I would be really happy to answer questions, particularly if I can see you guys again. Hold on.
Yeah, Mel, thank you for the presentation.
Yes.
I think we do have one public comment, and so as far as I know, so why don't we do that and then see if we've got a little bit of time for any questions that we have for Mel. Does that sound? So I think Chris, if you want to unmute and jump on the line here.
Thank you, and appreciate, Dan, you allowing this public comment period, and I guess if I'm the only one making the public comment. A couple things on the grant program, and then I have a last kind of observation, I think, that reflects on the grant program and this new level of analysis. But one, again, Chris Meyer, Local Energy Alliance Program, the Executive Director. We provide weatherization services to throughout the state and for multiple utility companies, et cetera. Monitoring and verification, my first piece, is hard, especially with single family detached and mobile homes. And so I would just hope that there is some kind of rationalization of when thinking about requiring monitoring and evaluation, and verification for the grant program, that, you know, again, there was a comment about it being really focused on multifamily. Yes, it's much easier to do that with a multifamily property than it is with, say, with 200 mobile homes, for example. So please keep that in mind when designing the grant program. Maybe Virginia Tech can help you do all that follow-up with Dominion, et cetera, but it's hard to get bills out of folks sometimes and do that follow-up and other utility providers. Second, I would hope you could shorten the implementation period from, make it, you know, request from 12 to 18 months. 2 years seems like a long time for a program, again, that is supposed to be addressing climate change mitigation and lower utility bills for folks as soon as possible. And so I would hope we could get plans and proposals that would act in 12 to 18 months rather than, again, a 24-month period. Second, and maybe related a little to that, I saw in the 2022 grant planning purposes, I think, and I would hope we're talking about action with this money and implementation, and the dollar spent on planning and even analysis is the dollar less is spent on, again, lowering somebody's energy bill and utility bill, which I think was the objective of of the legislation. So I would hesitate from allowing up to $500,000 in planning, and rather maybe cap that at $50,000 or something like that. $500,000 just for planning seems a little excessive, again, when the goal of the program is to be reducing energy bills for folks and, again, mitigating climate change. And finally, not finally, but I'd also, related to this is consider, do you really want to be potentially replacing fossil fuel equipment? I'm not saying we have to do fuel switching or benefit electrification, but do you really want to be locking in fossil fuel equipment with some of these programs potentially for another 15 or 20 years, even though it might be more efficient? But I think that is, on the thinking about the equipment side of things, something that should be considered. And finally, it's a very interesting analysis presentation that's going to be offered. You know, obviously, I think your community-based organizations and service providers like LEAP and CHP can tell you where there's energy burden. We're serving those customers already, and I would hope such analysis does not get in the way of serving folks, which already I think are going to have to be on the income qualification. So I would suggest you do as minimal as possible analysis, and again, rely on your implementation providers to help you understand where energy burden is going to be at, and ensuring that you there's going to be an income requirement already. Like, how much analysis do you have to actually need? Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Chris. Really good comments. Appreciate that. All right. Well, we are getting close to time, but if anybody has a short question for Mel, and we can also take some follow-up questions and get back to you if needs be. Advisory group, any questions for Mel?
Hi there, Casey Bliley here with Viridian. I do recall, I believe, please help me here, Susan Cruz, her group out of Charlottesville had done some similar assessment. I don't recall, Mel, it looks like you're nodding like you're aware of this analysis. If I recall correctly, their findings were that perhaps census tract was not at the granular level enough to capture some of the economic disparities. Can you, yeah, thank you.
It's good. We talked about that analysis, and you know, at in some of the more populated jurisdictions. So if you're looking at Charlottesville, for example, it's possible that we could get, you know, even past the block level for certain pieces, especially like estimates of energy cost burden. But it will depend block by block on the composition, whether or not we're able to get every group that you might want having reliable data. So you know that the Center for Housing Research places a really high emphasis on reliable data. And so this is one thing that we're going to have to give a little bit more thought to once we complete the preliminary analysis is what kind of coverage are we willing to accept? So are we going to be willing, if we're looking at a less densely populated place, to have grayed out areas, or do we need there to be reliable data cover the whole map, right? And, you know, are we going to have enough understanding among our users so that, let's say we have an extremely diverse census block group, for example, and that means that no one group is large enough for us to get a reliable measurement. Are we going to be happy with just a minority and then white-headed household measurements, for example? So it will depend a little bit, and we'll try to get as low as we can, and then make some smart decisions about how we want to present the data.
Yeah, and I guess I just bring it up because it was already presented as perhaps that we weren't getting all the information. So it sounds like you guys have really thought through how do we make sure that the data is defensible and accurate. But it sounds like also, as you just noted, when you present the data, perhaps calling out those areas that what we do and don't know or might be hinting at.
Yeah. And, you know, in densely populated places like Charlottesville, like all of Fairfax County, you know, Northern Virginia, Richmond, Newport News, those places will be able to get very rich and very granular on the data presentation. But once we get into more rural places with less population density, the sample just isn't big enough. So we will have to be conscious of those things.
Sorry to break in here, folks, but I think for folks that need to jump off and go to their 1 o'clock meetings, we're going to have to wrap up. I do see Stu had a question, and Stu, you can follow up with me on that in terms of R&D opportunities. Yep, happy to talk with you about that. So, but let's adjourn for today. Thanks everybody. Enjoy the warm weather, and we will reconvene again soon.
Thanks, everyone.